In the Chinese readout, as well as in the U.S. readout, we saw that both countries were more or less reiterating their positions. The Chinese Foreign Ministry put out a statement saying that that President Xi had essentially laid out to President Biden what China's position is and continues to be. He started with the Taiwan issue, saying that Taiwan is the first red line that must not be crossed. What was interesting is that the Chinese side acknowledged that President Biden said that the U.S. does not support Taiwan independence or to China's. And President Biden has said this in the past, but it's positive that at least the Chinese did acknowledge it. On competition, again, we heard that President Biden had brought up the importance of competition in this relationship, but also that it doesn't turn into conflict. The Chinese side said that President Xi had also agreed that that should be the case. However, he did point out that this to the Chinese would mean no trade or tech wars, barriers, decoupling, or severing supply chains, saying that all of that is very detrimental. So obviously pushing back on some of the export controls, as well as some of the other reshoring efforts by the U.S. of supply chains, because it is bad for the Chinese economy. When it comes to the human rights issues, the White House really seemed to make a point of saying that President Biden had stressed that human rights was brought up in these discussions in a wide-ranging effort. From the Chinese side, there wasn't as much a discussion about that, but they did say that President Xi more or less said that the Chinese have their own Chinese system when it comes to democracy as well as human rights. So not as much of an acknowledgement there. But on Ukraine, and this is really, I think, where you see the big difference, because President Biden had stressed the importance of Ukraine and ending the war there. But President Xi, in the Chinese readout, again, no use of the word war, no blaming of Russia, and in fact, more or less washed his hands of the Chinese getting involved at all, saying that they look to Ukraine and Russia having conversations, and also the U.S., NATO, and the EU getting involved in those discussions with Russia. Guys?
Eunice, stay with us. We want to bring in our Kayla Tausche, get some more color on just the whole meeting itself. Kayla, I wonder, he talked about putting a floor in the relations. Obviously, the framing of the competitive economic competition, the human rights element, or maybe just getting him on the record regarding the use of nuclear weapons around Ukraine.
Yeah, there was a lot to be discussed, especially because relations had deteriorated in recent months, making this nearly 3-hour meeting, Carl, the most consequential of Biden's presidency thus far. Talks had stalled between the two countries since House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taiwan in August, and today's face-to-face sought to change that, to take down the temperature and lower the possibility of a misunderstanding or a military conflict if each of the two countries understood the other's red lines. In the press conference after the meeting, President Biden was asked whether he saw a new Cold War forming or an invasion of Taiwan imminent. Here's how President Biden answered.
I think the United States is better prepared than any country in the world, economically and politically, to deal with the changing circumstances around the world. And I think that Xi Jinping is. We agreed that we would set up a set of circumstances where on issues that we had to further resolve details.
So that's a different soundbite than the one that I was hoping we would run, which said that the president said, I absolutely believe there will not be a new Cold War. I do not think there's any imminent attempt on the part of China to invade Taiwan. And I made it clear that our policy there has not changed at all. On another note, in discussions about both Russia and North Korea, the White House readout said the two leaders agreed nuclear war should not be fought and cannot be won. The meeting paved the way for new talks on various issues and a visit to China by the Secretary of State. But there's no sign that hawkishness toward Beijing by Washington on economic issues is decreasing, as Eunice was just mentioning, and especially after the midterm elections, which is going to make any progress harder to come by. Guys.